Robot of Clystra. From the Fireball XL5 Annual, 1963. Steve Zodiac's eyes hardly left the heat shield meter as Fireball Jr. slid through the thin upper layers of the atmosphere of Clystra, fourth planet of the star Krodos. Venus, who never tired of the thrill of visiting new worlds, watched the blue-green planet below.
You think we shall find the wreck of the Starduster here, Steve?
Seems likely, on the information we have. Be worthwhile if we can locate it. Some cargo, eh? Iridium ore and robots. That ore is worth $10 million.
It looks a lovely world. What do we know about it?
Mighty little, Venus. It's like Earth, but bigger and a bit hotter. He frowned as he read his speed. That's odd. We're going too fast. He took a glance at Robert the robot, sitting expressionless behind them. Can't be his weight making all that difference.
The heat, Steve,
she cried. Little flecks of white-hot metal were beginning to whip past the cabin. The heat shield was beginning to break up. Gravity, he exclaimed. That's what we don't know about. It's much stronger than Earth's. Must take our time about this. He watched the creeping needle, feeling his heartbeat a shade faster. No go. Have to fire retros. Hold tight. He thumbed the firing button, and the three occupants, two human and one mechanical, lurched forward as the ship slowed. Steve nodded grimly, his mouth a tight line. So, he muttered, that worked. And how much fuel are we going to have left if I have to keep on doing that? He made a calculation about Fireball's orbit. The big ship was too far away for a return now. Venus, get on to Matt. Tell him about this. Venus tried the short-range radio. A few moments later, she turned serious eyes to her companion.
I can't raise him, she whispered. It's not that the radio's dead, but I just can't contact him.
Fireball Jr. was down, just. As Matt might have said, the tanks were spitting dry. From the nose of the cabin, Steve surveyed the brilliant landscape, but his eyes were not on the beautiful flowers and massive trees. Steve was desperately worried about the fuel problem and the radio problem. There would soon be a food problem too. It looked mighty tough.
This planet must have a very thick ionosphere, Venus said. It blanks out all radio signals.
Yeah, Steve gave a sigh. Where we go from here, I don't know. But we are here, so we might as well see what we've got. We could have it a long time. He switched to Robert and scowled at him. You're all right, buddy, he said. You don't have to eat. And that positronic brain of yours wasn't built to worry. He addressed the robot. You will stay here and guard ship. Detain anyone strange who comes near. Robert repeated the order in his vibrating sing-song voice. A few moments later, Venus and Steve lifted out on their jetmobiles from Fireball Jr. Grimly, Steve wondered when the little ship would lift off again, if ever. In the open, the brilliant white sun struck them friendly blows. Remembering that because of the extra gravity there was also a fuel problem with the jetmobiles, Steve looked down on the thick bluish grass and lush jungle green. Very pretty, he remarked. If the animal life is as vigorous as the plants, then we might meet some mighty interesting customers. They sailed lightly down to the sandy edge of a tideless sea. Red-brown six-legged creatures, the size of dinner plates, scuttled away at their approach. They reckon Starduster came down near some rocky cliffs on the western shore of this ocean, he said. How long this shore is, nobody seems to know. He gazed out across the glittering water. Venus was not looking at the water. She had her attention fixed upon the teeming jungle, which in places came almost down to the water's edge. Some leaves moved, some branches swayed, and then, with a short coughing roar, a creature bounded out of the foliage and stood, front feet splayed, watching them with savage, yellow eyes. It was the Clystran version of a saber-toothed tiger. Steve spun, and his gun was in his hand, even as the horrific creature crouched to spring. Then from the dense foliage came a sound like a whiplash, and a thin needle of brilliant light spat out, touching the great beast on the shoulder. With a terrible scream more human than animal, the tiger leaped, fell, rolled over, and was still. Steve, shaken, approached the still body and towed it. Dead right enough, he said. But what did it? Venus nodded her head.
Clearly, she said, we have a friend. Why didn't he stop to say hello?
Steve stared at the rugged face of the cliff, which rose above the mat of jungle which bordered the shoreline. "There are holes in that cliff," he said. "And there's a ledge. You see it?" Venus nodded. "I'm not sure," he went on, "but it looks to me as though some human, or almost human, being did a little chipping and shaping up there." He strode to the jetmobiles and examined the fuel gauges. "We should just about be able to lift up there and still get back to Fireball Jr., okay?"
"Okay, Steve,"
said Venus. She had worked with him a long time and always relied on his judgment. "About 250 feet, he said. "Make for the far end where it's broadest." Trying to conserve fuel, they rose gently. 50 feet, 80 feet, 100. There was a sudden swooping shadow, and a flying creature hissed past them, whirled with an unpleasant rustle of leathery wings, easily 30 feet across, and dived again, its toothy beak snapping. Steve, precariously balanced, had his sights on it when, once again, a needle of flame whipped up from below and caught the flyer in the neck. It fell like a stone, and a crash of branches told of its fall.
"Wow,"
muttered Steve.
"Come on, let's make that ledge."
They made the ledge and parked the jetmobiles.
"Look,"
cried Venus.
"Surely those are chisel marks."
"Yeah," said Steve. "And look at this, a cave. And tools have been used to enlarge it." They went into the gloom. The cave contained some steel chairs, a collapsible table, the remains of a bed, and a book. Steve picked up the book, turned the yellow pages, awestruck.
"Look, Venus, it's the log of the Starduster."
And as they gazed upon it, the light in the cave became suddenly less. A man-like shape stood there, and Steve found himself ready to defend himself against a robot.
"I thought it was Robert,"
said Venus, trying to keep her voice steady.
"But it's another. It has a gun in its hand. Be careful, Steve."
Steve approached, slowly. The thing was a machine, and if it had been on Clystra ever since the wreck of the Starduster, it could be a dangerous machine.
"Robot,"
said Steve softly.
"Identify yourself."
No answer. The robot seemed to sway. Its eye scanners glowed faintly in the dim light. Venus came and stood by Steve.
"You know what I think? This robot is a survivor from the Starduster. See how worn out it looks. And the flash gun in its hand, all caked with grime."
"That's it, Venus," cried Steve. "It's worn out, has no voice. But it could still tell us where the wreck of the Starduster is. It could lead us to it." The knees of the robot buckled, and it slid to the floor. Venus was right. Though the machine remained switched on, it had little use now. Steve went up to it and looked at its nameplate. "Multiple Aptitudes Robot. Positronic Brain, number 7. San Diego, California, 2049. He looked grave as he rose to his feet. "This machine was our last hope, I guess. If it could have led us to the wreck, we might have found fuel, even a more powerful radio. But now..." Venus walked to the entrance of the cave and looked down at the teeming jungle and the golden strip of sand beside the tideless sea. She started.
"Steve!"
she exclaimed.
"I saw something move down there just across that bit of sand. I only caught a glimpse of it, but there was something."
Steve looked until the sun's glare made his eyes ache. "No," he murmured. "I think you must have been mistaken. There's nothing... Hey, listen." A sing-song voice, flat and mechanical, was chanting and getting nearer.
"Hear you calling. I am coming. I am coming."
"That's Robert,"
gasped Venus.
"But he should be with Fireball Jr. He's supposed to obey only us."
Then the shiny figure of the robot appeared down the ledge, approaching, still chanting.
"Robert,"
snapped Steve,
"you have disobeyed a prime order."
Message from other robot received. Positronic brain like shortwave radio.
intoned Robert.
He wished to help. Shot bad creatures. I heard brain working.
"So that's it."
Steve suddenly felt cheerful again.
"Even if this robot can't speak or move, as long as there's current left in him, you can communicate. Ask him if there are any fuel supplies left. Even if it's old-fashioned hydrazine, that will take us up to XL5.
For a moment, Robert stood quite still. The scanners of the other robot glowed faintly.
Robot only survivor,
said Robert.
Supplies on Starduster in center of ship. Starduster wrecked. Bad. Tail landing. Supplies still there. Come.
Going down the cliff face did not take much fuel. Robert, still in contact with the failing robot, guided Steve and Venus by the side of the great cliff along the shoreline. They rounded a great grey buttress, and there in the tangle of jungle, the ribs of the wrecked cargo ship stuck out like giant claws.
"There she is," called Steve. "We didn't see her as we came because we went too far along the shore, and the jungle hid the wreck."
He climbed down into the old Starduster. He descended a twisted ladder, then another, and forced a door with a shot from his gun. The gloom was oppressive. At last his torchlight shone on a door. "Fuel Tank 1, it read. Hydrazine D. Steve went back to his companions a lot quicker than he had left them.
"We'll manage," he said. "If I can get a pump working, we'll run a fuel line to Fireball Jr. and we'll be away. But first we must transfer the vanadium ore to Fireball Jr.
Krodos was sinking in the west before two tired and perspiring humans and one tireless robot closed hatches on Fireball Jr. and prepared to lift off. By the side of the machine, a discarded fuel line snaked away into the jungle. Somewhere a saber-tooth gave its coughing roar.
"Thoughtful, Venus?"
asked Steve, as he settled himself into the number 1 chair.
"I was thinking,"
she replied softly,
"of that other robot. How well he was made, and how well he served us, right to the end."
"That's right," said Steve gravely. "Robots are made to serve man."
"Made to serve man,"
repeated Robert. Then the rockets fired, and Fireball Jr. lifted away from the heavy pull of Clystra, up to where the stars were beginning to sparkle, to where the great ship, Fireball XL5, awaited them.